Thank you for having purchased our Innovatools Modular Brake. In this quick video, we will show you step-by-step how to assemble your modular brake. Depending on the length and options you've selected, plan anywhere from 1 to 2 hours for the initial assembly of the brake. In this video, you'll see the tools that are required, how to unbox your brake, how to assemble your brake, and how to adjust your brake, ensuring you're ready to use it after this. So here are the few simple tools that you'll need to assemble your Innovatools Modular Brake. So inserted with your Innovatools package, you'll have a 3/16 ball end wrench, a 3/16 impact socket. Outside of that, you will need a 9/16 socket, ideally with an impact wrench or a ratchet, an extension for the bit. If you don't have that, you can do it manually. It's not required, it just makes your life easier. A 9/16 wrench, a measuring tape, safety glasses, a hammer, and a piece of wood to line up pieces if you need to, and an impact drill. So this is unboxing. As you'll notice, this is how the brake will be shipped to your doorstep. In this video, we'll be doing a 10-foot, 6 inches, 24-inch contractor grade, as it's one of the most popular model. And you'll notice that you got 2 major boxes. So you'll have a big bulky box that will contain the PowerPlates, some handles, and some accessories. And then you'll have the extrusion box that will contain section of the extrusions to make up the module. So depending on the model that you've ordered, you'll have more or less of each of those boxes, but the overall shipment will consist of those 2 main packages. All right, so we're just gonna unbox the first box, but we'll be, all 3 boxes are the same, so we'll do the same process for all 3. We'll just show you one unboxing. So we'll just lay everything out across the table. So first we'll have our moving anvil, our Backrail section, the fixed anvil and hinge assembly, and then the top handle. All right, so now that we've unboxed everything, you'll notice we have 3 42-inch sections. Now this is important if you have different length sections. If you have different length sections, you got to put the odd one in the middle. If you have 242 and a 36, you want the 242 on the end, the 36 in the middle. If you have 342 and 136, you want the 42 and the 42 on the other end, and the remaining 42 and the 36 in the middle. Always make sure you have either 242 or 236 on the ends, and the mix and match in the middle. So in this instance, we got our 3 modules laid out, ready to be assembled. And you'll notice we have 2 modules and 1 connection in between, and then another 2 modules and another connection of another bag of connectors going in between. If we had a 4th section for a longer brake, we would have another set of connector bag for that middle section. But since we only have 3 modules, we'll have 2 bags. The interesting thing that you'll notice is that all our connectors are exactly the same and all our bolts are exactly the same, and they can be used in any order. So to complete this task, you'll need your impact drill with the 3/16 supply bit that's in the kit. And then I'd recommend wearing safety glasses in case something happens. So we'll open up the bag of connectors. We'll take out 2 connectors to make this first connection, and then we'll take out the flathead screws as well. So it's important to notice that on the connectors, there's kind of an up and a down. So one side's machined, the other side isn't machined. So the bolts will always be going through the machine side first. The simple reason for that is that you'll notice all the extrusion pieces have a matching male V-notch on them, and the connectors have a matching female V-notch on them. So that interlocks everything perfectly, and we'll make sure that you're lined up perfectly with your holes, and we'll get started screwing. So we're gonna put the screw on the bit and make sure that you're not cross-threading, and screw tight. So always start with the outer screw and leave the inner screw for once the connection is completed. So we'll flip over to the other side, insert the machine side facing up again, screw tight, and now that we have these 2 connectors inserted, we'll slide the other section in, and then we'll screw the 2 outer ones first. Now that the 4 outer screws are screwed, then we can move on to the inner ones. So the inner ones are really going to pull everything tight together. And our first connection is done. And now that this connection is completed, we'll do the other connection on this side. So now that we've made both our connections, all screws are in place, we'll put that aside to make room to assemble the back rail. All right, so now that we have our back rail in the front here, we'll start with the same process that we did earlier. We'll grab 2 connectors and we'll assemble the joint here. And again, we'll start by inserting the connectors on the 2 sides. So we'll start with the top side, machine side facing up. Tighten the screw, and then repeat on the opposite side, like so. Now that we have the 2 outer screws assembled with those 2 connectors, we'll join the pieces together, just making sure everything lines up nice and tight. If you need to, you can take a hammer to tap the end with a piece of wood. Once it's assembled close enough, we'll be able to assemble the outer screws. Now that we have all the 4 exterior screws assembled, we'll assemble the middle screws. So now that this joint is completed, we'll move on to the next joint and repeat the same process. All right, so now that everything is assembled, you can see the precision of the machining is outstanding. We got all our connectors connected with all the bolts mounted. We'll put that aside to make room for the next extrusion. So now we'll do the connection on the moving anvil, and we'll grab, you'll notice for this one, we'll need 3 connectors for this extrusion. So again, they're all the same, so take 3 of them, and then we'll start the assembly. So again, make sure the machine side of the connector is facing up, and center the hole with the opening, and tighten the screw on the end tight. We'll flip the extrusion around, and we'll repeat the same on the 3 other connectors. Now that we've assembled the 3 connectors and the screws are in, we'll be able to make the joint with the next section. So simply insert all the little teeth, the male and female parts together, and then bring them close. You'll see here that our joint, the gap is not so great, but you'll notice as soon as we start putting screws in, everything will close nice and tight. Rotate again. We'll do the outer screw on the back. Do the outer screw on the underside. Now that everything is fastened on the outer perimeter, we'll do the middle of the joint all around. The middle screws are really what pulls everything super tight and are under tension. It almost looks like the hole is off, but it's intended on purpose to add additional pressure once it's all assembled. Again, here's the nice tight joint that's seamless and perfect. Everything is lining up perfectly. So now that this connection is completed, we'll go on to this connection, doing all the same step in the same order. So now that the moving anvil is completely assembled, we'll put that aside so that we can finish the last extrusion that needs to be assembled. All right, so on to the last extrusion assembly. So this one is the moving hinge and the fixed anvil. So again, same process. All the connectors will be used on this last connection, and same on the other end. All right, so again, we'll use the connectors. We'll take out the 5 connectors, and we can take out all the screws. So again, take the machine side facing up, and you'll notice that we'll have 3 of them on the fixed anvil. So flip over, 1, 2, 3. Can you see that one? Or? So we got the 3 on the fixed anvil. Pull the moving hinge over, and we'll repeat with the 2 remaining connectors. Now that we have all 5 of our connectors connected to the end, we'll start the assembly process with the other side. So we'll move the hinge out first, make sure everything lines up nice, and then we'll assemble these 2. And as you can see again, as we screw, everything lines up nice and tight. Now that we got the outer screws screwed in, we can move on to the middle screws. Now that we have the hinge connected, then we'll move on to those ones. You'll notice that these slide in and out, so we can adjust ourselves accordingly. It makes it easier to do one extrusion set at a time. So we'll grab the 3 outer screws to complete that. Once we have all the outer screws installed, we'll do the middle ones. Finish the assembly process. Again, everything is nice and smooth. Here's our connection. And then we'll move on to the next one and repeat the same step-by-step process. As you'll notice, we always send a few extra screws for your convenience. So the next step, now that we've assembled all our extrusions, will be to unbox the PowerPlates, the bending handle, and complete the assembly process of mounting the PowerPlate frames to the extrusion pieces. So you'll notice that each PowerPlate will come with its own hardware bag. It's the exact same screws we used in the past to do the connection between the extrusions, but all the hardware that you need to mount all the extrusions onto that PowerPlate is part of that bag. Each PowerPlate will have its own bag. So the next step will be to mount our PowerPlate frames to our now assembled extrusions. We'll first start with the hinge assembly extrusion to mount the PowerPlate. Regardless of the length of the brake, regardless whether you have a 42-inch or a 36-inch, regardless whether it's 3 or 4 module or 2 modules, the first PowerPlate will always be at the second hole from the end, so not the first hole, but the second hole that is 7 inches from the end. That's where you're going to mount your first PowerPlate frame on both ends. So the first step will be to rest the hinge up, resting it on its bottom ledges, and taking your PowerPlate frame and inserting it on the second hole from the end, lining yourself up as much as you can to the hole location. So now that we have inserted our PowerPlate at the second hole location from the end, we'll drop that arm down. If the pin is not removed, make sure you remove the pin. And then we'll take the screw supplied in the hardware bag, and we'll mount that where it needs to go, nice and tight. So now that this PowerPlate is mounted at the second hole from the end, we'll repeat the exact same process at the other end. Again, second hole from the end, 7 inches from the end, slide in the PowerPlate. If the pin is in, remove the pin, otherwise drop the arm down in between, in the middle of the PowerPlate, and mount the mounting screw. So now that the two end plates are mounted 7 inches from the end of the brake, we'll focus on the middle power plates. So the next step will be to mount the second power plate onto the hinge assembly. The second power plate is also critical from a distance standpoint, especially if you're going to use our collapsible stand. So what you want to do is you want to use your measuring tape hooked on the end and go to 43 1/4. So you go to 43 inches and a quarter. You notice that our first one was at 7 inches, like we've talked about previously. The second one will mount at the whole location at 43 1/4, and you will repeat that from both ends. So again, insert the power plate into the extrusion, push that down to give us access with the drill, and then screw the screw in. So again, we'll restart the exact same process for this power plate as we did on that end. So again, hooked on from the end. The first one we had measured at 7 inches. Now we want to find 43 1/4, the hole closest to that, which is this whole location here. I'll take my power plate, drop it in, lining up the hole, and then I'll push that down to give myself clearance to screw the screw in place. So this sums up the location of the 4 power plate frames on a 3-section brake like we have here. So this is the plate location for a contractor grade brake. If you have a longer model than a 3-section module brake, obviously you'll have a much bigger gap in the middle. So the additional power plate, you'll simply mount it in the middle of that gap in the whole location, the closest to the center. If you have a heavy-duty grade brake, or down the road you upgrade to a heavy-duty grade, you'll simply be adding the additional power plates in the middle of those existing gaps. All right, so the next step that now that we've finalized that all the gapping is accurate, we'll lift up the hinge and we'll do the assembly of the power plate through the bottom. So now that the hinge assembly is fully mounted to the power plates, we'll jump onto the back rail. So again, you'll see that the back rail has hole locations, which should line up perfectly with where we've placed the power plates on the hinge assembly. So we'll put that underneath here. Line yourself up with the joint in the right space so that you're even on the end. So this sums up the mounting of the back rail to the power plates. So the next step will be to add the end caps to the bottom hinge to prevent the hinge from sliding out like so, and to install the rubber on front of the moving hinge. All right, so now we're gonna install the end caps on the hinge. So you'll notice there's a left one and a right one. The left one, when facing the brake, is the one with the little drilled hole. So this one fits like so. And then you just take the screw, same screw that we've been using all along, and secure it in place, and then start the same process at the other end. All right, so now the next step will be to install the rubber on the moving hinge. So you'll notice there's a skinnier part and a wider part. We want the skinnier part towards the back of the brake and the thicker part at the front of the hinge. If you need to, you can also take the needle nose pliers to help you feed it through. It might also be easier to have somebody else assist you with that process. As you'll notice here, obviously it's way too long. We ship them for a 14-foot brake, so just trim off the excess. I would leave about a 1/2 inch longer so that if it shrinks down, it's not too short. So as you can see, the rubber is free floating inside the hinge. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take either a punch or a small bit, and we're gonna come pinch the aluminum over the rubber with the hammer. as you can see, it no longer moves. All right, so now the next step will be to install the top handle. As you'll notice, there's no holes in the handle, unlike all the other extrusion. We simply did that for comfort, so it's going to require an extra step to exactly, precisely show where we're going to mount it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go flush with the extrusion in the front, and then with the center of our hole location, we'll be marking a pencil line at every power plate to show us where the middle of that red arm will be after it's installed. One important thing to keep in mind, if you have a brake that's 4 modules and you got a non-module in the middle where it's not both the same middle modules, make sure that you don't have it reversed. All right, so now that we've marked our top handle tube location for where we're going to be mounting it, the next step will be to pull up the red lever arms and insert the pivot pin on there. So you'll notice there's 2 holes. Since we're in the pull to lock position, we'll use the back hole. If you want to go to the push to lock position, just hang on, make sure you finalize the assembly process with our instructions, and then there's going to be a separate video once the brake is fully assembled to show you how to reverse the mechanism. So again, use the back hole, line yourself up on the pivot point, and then insert the pin. So the next step will be to mount the top handle to those red arms. So again, you'll see that we've just put all our marks in, so slide that over so that it locks in, and then rotate it. You can pull it back down so that it's all across, make sure everything's inserted, and then we'll line ourselves up on our mark to be centered with the red arm. We have our little fingers that slide right over, and then we'll screw them in place. All right, so the next step will be to make sure that all the adjustments are equal across all the power plates. So we preset everything from the factory, but in case we forgot something, make sure you double check those adjustments before mounting the moving anvil. So from the factory, we set it at the 5/8 distance, so make sure that the 5/8 line lines up with the bottom line on the red piece. If you need to adjust it, remove the pin, and then you can push back and forth to adjust it to the measurement. So I'll put it back to 5/8. And then we also want to make sure that the clamping adjustment is equal in fairly close across all the power plates to ensure that when we put the moving anvil on, it'll all be nice and straight. So the next step will be to install our moving anvil onto our brake. So you'll see the level of machining that goes into this. So basically, make sure you're lined up left to right so you can line yourself up on your joint. When you're ready to mount the extrusion, simply make sure that the round lip on the back of the extrusion lines up with the quarter round on the bottom of the adjuster here. Make sure that you're lined up along the whole way, and then you can gradually start rotating down the handle. Make sure that the top of the adjuster goes into the top lip here and that you're still engaged across all the power plates. Once that's confirmed, you can simply rotate the handle to pull down, and the moving anvil is now ready to be screwed in place. If for whatever reason you need to remove the anvil because it didn't clip properly along the whole way, what you want to do is take either a dead blow hammer or a piece of wood and a hammer, and you'll want to hit the front here while holding the back handle to slowly rotate the anvil down. So tap at the front while I'm applying pressure to rotate it off the adjusters, and keep going until it pops off. Like so. It's as simple as that, and then you can remount it afterwards in the right location. So if you need to center the hole on the anvil to the mounting block, just do a little tap to center everything. All right, so the next step, now that we've centered all our hole between the extrusion and the mounting block, will be to do the top screw at all PowerPlates. So the next step, if you have an extension for your impact, that will save you a lot of time, otherwise you'll have to do it manually. But with the extension, we'll pull the brake off the table so that we can mount the bottom of our extrusion by underneath. Repeat at all frames. So the first step will be to grab our 9/16 socket to mount it onto our impact drill, and then we'll take the handle assembly. So these handles are going to mount on the side of the PowerPlate frames. If you have a contractor grade, you'll have 2 handles for each end. If you have a heavy duty model, you'll have 4 of those handles, so 2 for each end and 2 that you can place anywhere along the way. This is used to carry the brake when it's in the storage mode, ready to move it. But when you're bending, these are the bending arms that mount to the front of the hinge. So first step is we'll remove the 2 3/8 bolts, and then we'll pull out the pins from the handle. And you'll see again, we've designed this so that it's easy to mount. So insert it like a key, you rotate, slide it over, and repeat with the front. So insert the key, rotate, slide it over. Before we screw from the backside, what we're going to want to do on the 19-inch deep, you'll want the red piece facing the back, facing up. On the 24-inch, it doesn't matter. But reinsert the pins, so that ensures that the brackets are perfectly lined up before you screw from the back. We'll take the 3/8 bolt, mount them to the side, and you'll notice here I pull the brake out over so that I can reach with the impact to complete the screwing. So we'll repeat the exact same process at this end. Obviously, if you have a heavy duty grade, you'll have 2 extra sets, an extra pair of those handles that you can place anywhere along the way if you want to, or you can leave them aside as per your preference. All right, so now that we've mounted the handle to the PowerPlate, this is what you'd be using to carry the brake around when you need to move it. Whenever you're ready to bend, this will be the handle that you'll be using to do the bending. So simply pull the 2 quick pins out, pull the handle off. You'll notice there's a 3rd quick pin at the top here that holds and secures the red plug in place. And you'll notice that the red plug has a finger on one side. So what you want to do is you want to mount that finger onto the hinge, and then you can insert the pipe. And once you add that fast pin back in that hole, that's what secures everything in place. So right now I'm showing you right from the edge so that you can see easily, but you can do those exact same steps right from the middle and get bending. You can slide the handle to wherever you want so that it's convenient for your position. And whenever you're ready to put it back in place, you simply take it out, make sure you put it back in place, and then you just put the fast pins back in and you're ready to transport your brake around the job site. It's as simple as that. So now that we've fully assembled our brake, we'll move on to the adjustment side of things. You'll notice that everything is super intuitive and very easy to do. So we'll first start by adjusting our arm leverage motion. So right now, as you can see, it's too loose. It drops on its own. This is going to be a simple adjustment that happens on the 3/8 bolt in the back along every PowerPlate. So we'll grab either 2 9/16 wrench or an adjustable wrench, and we're going to increase the pressure at the back here on the 3/8 bolt back here. And as little as 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch can make the difference. So as you can see now, it sets up on its own. It's still very easy to pull back. One thing to keep in mind, the precision of our machining is so precise and you can dial it in perfectly to your own need that right now it's resting up on its own, but just adding accessories to the anvil will drop it down. So just do a 1/16 of a turn or just minute adjustments on the PowerPlates. And then you'll notice that'll stay up to your preference. And 1 finger close. All right, so for the next step, we're going to put gloves on because we're going to be using either aluminum or steel, depending on what you're bending. And we'll be cutting out we'll have little cutouts that we insert below every PowerPlate along the way. And we'll check the clamping pressure adjustment. So what we want to do is have one of those pieces along the whole way. and then we'll lock the brake in place, and we want to see the friction between everyone. So as you can see, I'm having a hard time. This one's a little loose. So depending on the material that you're bending, if you have aluminum, you can have the piece be a little bit looser, versus if you're doing heavier gauge material, you want it tight, especially on 24 gauge steel, to prevent it from slipping out of the brake. So it's really a matter of your preference. The more clamping pressure you require, the more force you'll require at the last step of closing the anvil. If you have less pressure, then it's going to be smooth along the whole way. So if you want to increase the clamping pressure, turn clockwise. And if you want to decrease the clamping pressure, turn counterclockwise. Because we're doing just aluminum here, we'll keep it soft and easy. So I'm going to loosen up. I'll go about 1/4 inch, and then I can adjust to see it's still not slipping much. So I'll add another 1/4 inch, and then you can see it's a little bit easier. That one's a little tight too, so I'll loosen it up. That's easier. That one's a little tight, so, and then I can see the operation of how it works. It's still a little tight, so it's really a matter of your own preference. If I go very loose, for aluminum, it'll still fold. But you'll notice that it's also even easier to operate the brake with one finger to lock it. So set it to your own preference for what works best for you. All right, so in this video, we're going to show you how to quickly and efficiently adjust the anvil setback from 1/2 inch to 5/8 to 3/4 inch in a few simple steps. In order to adjust anything, the first step is to make sure that you have the brake lock in the lock position and remove those bottom pins along the whole way. Now with the pins removed, we can open up the brake and you'll see the teeth mechanism will unlatch from one another, allowing back and forth movement. And you'll see the lines that say 3/4 inch, 5/8, and 1/2 inch. So whenever you're lining up to those lines is where you're set at. So basically, 1/2 inch is tight all the way forward. So make sure you pull both ends of the brake tight to the front. Once you've pulled the brake along the way to the front at 1/2 inch, you can close up your anvil again. And now you can reinsert the pins in the lock position along the whole way. And now the brake is adjusted for 1/2 inch, ready to be used. So now, if you want to go from the 1/2 inch to the 3/4, again, make sure that the brake is in the lock position. Remove all those pins along the way. With all the pins removed, you can now disengage the teeth on the bottom, and pushed all the way in will give you your 3/4. So make sure you push along the whole length of the brake. And now you can lock it in place and reinsert the pins on every power plate. So this gives you the 3/4 inch setback. And as you can see, the lines are lined up at the 3/4 inch mark along the back here. If you want to do the 5/8, which is in between the 1/2 inch and the 3/4 inch, obviously, you'll have one single extra step, which is very simple. So make sure that all the pins are removed. And then you unlock the brake, pull the anvil moving forward, and you'll see at the back here we have an extra hole. So reinsert one or a few pins along the way at the back hole. And with the pins inserted, now push till it stops on the pin. So you'll see the red part here bumps against the pin. And then you can lock the brake in place, remove the pins after it's locked, and reinsert the pin along every power plates. And now you're ready to use your brake at 5/8. All right, so this completes our assembly and adjustment video for your new Innovatools Modular Brake. If ever you're interested in reversing the locking mechanism to the push-to-lock motion, make sure you watch a separate video that addresses that. If you have accessories that you've purchased along with your brake, make sure you watch our other collection of videos that show step-by-step how to install each accessories. And if you need any support at all, please reach out. We'll be happy to assist you.